Sentinel Mindset.
Imagine a world where your mind operates at peak efficiency, where stress and uncertainty are no longer obstacles, but opportunities for growth. You see, in life, we're always conditioned on physical fitness and how important it is to our overall health. But do we ever really talk about mental fitness? Well, my next guest today, Marc Champagne, he's the best-selling author, podcast host, keynote speaker, and mental fitness strategist who helps corporate teams and individuals enhance their mental well-being. He's the author of the best-selling book, Personal Socrates, Better Questions, Better Lives. He's the host of the top 50 ranked podcast, Behind the Human. And he's also co-founder of an app called Keynote, who has reached over 86.9 million people. It's a journaling app. He's provided mental fitness strategies to Fortune 500 companies like VaynerMedia, Google Pixel, Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, and the list goes on. I'm really looking forward to this, and if you're someone that thinks they need a little bit of mental fitness, you do not want to miss this episode. Next on the Sentinel Mindset. What's going on, everyone? Hoping we have a fantastic day today. Marc, what's up, buddy?
I'm 100%. I'm excited to be here. The energy is great, obviously, in this studio, in this room. We connected briefly not too long ago, and I think we talked about this. There's something when you meet your tribe and people that you really, vibe well with, you just have to spend more time with them. So I'm excited for that.
100%, man. Yeah. And I'll say, for everyone listening, where I first got an opportunity to hear you was, we're part of the McKay Forum group, and they have a speaker that comes in every month, and they said, we have Marc Champagne coming down, and he's going to be talking about mental fitness. And when I first heard that, I'm thinking, okay, so I kind of get an idea what we're talking about, something to do with the mind and, tricks and all these kind of things that can help out. But when I had a chance to see you and you walked into the room, you just mentioned the word energy. Your energy was up, it was up, and I gravitated towards that right away. And then when you're going into your whole conversation about mental fitness, and you started talking about and I'm just fast tracking it right now. You started going into the importance and breathing exercises, and you kind of did this thing with us. I found that to be so it's like my body said, you need to do this right now, because at that time. And I don't feel like this right now because I'm telling my people right now, guys, I'm in Zen mode still because I just came back from Hawaii. So I'm very much in complete peace mode right now.
Yeah.
Things that have happened this week, I have not allowed them to get to myself because I'm almost creating those walls of protection before it happens so it won't let me get there. So I feel that whole experience that I had with you was so profound. That I said, I have to get you on this show because as we've talked about, a lot of the people that listen to us are not dealing with the regular 9-to-5 things that people do on their jobs. I mean, 9-to-5 deals with stress and pressures and all that.
Yeah.
But for the types of work that they do, they could be dealing with things that could be life-changing, meaning as in that they could be on death's door based on the decision that they're going to make.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, and there's so many factors, right? There's the stress of the job and what people have to deal with. There's the fact that a lot of this work is shift work and wild hours that really, blows your sleep cycles out of there's so many factors that are, I think, part of the job that some of it we can't control, but we can set up other elements and other, our environment to be the most supportive so that we feel our best, have the tools to process the stuff that's coming up, and then we're our best version of ourselves. And I don't know about you, but like I mentioned before, I have family members in law enforcement, so I care deeply for them for that. But also just as a community member, these are the people that are protecting us,
right?
It's like that classic airline example. You have to put your oxygen mask on first before helping others. So if I can help in any capacity with at least the work that I do and the people that I study and translate that to people that I have such respect for, and I think a lot of us do, that protect us and keep us safe and so forth, that feels pretty good.
No, that's awesome, man. I think to really hit home like kind of like dealing with situations that would require you to have some sort of mental fitness, right? I think sharing that experience from my end, and kind of, I told you, I want to tell you a story that happened, right?
Yeah.
So my job, we have 3 companies, and they all have equal amount of demand that comes from them. And, usually I like to take a couple of breaks throughout the year if I can, but I don't shut off in those breaks, right? So it'll be like, I'm going to be away from the office. I might go away for the weekend, but my phone's nonstop being looked at, the whole 9 yards. So over the course of this past year, around December, around the time of our talk, I'm right now like bottling like thousands of pounds of stress and pressure and anxiety.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And the funny thing is I talk about this with my brother quite a bit because he's kind of gone like the whole entire like guru Tony Robbins way of this dealing with things. We have good conversations, but sometimes to hear it and not put any practice on it can just be talk, right? It's like, what are you going to do? It's like saying, I'm going to go to the gym because I want to change my body and my health habits, but you do nothing about it, right?
Yeah.
So I say that because we leave to go to Hawaii for 2 weeks. And in my mind, I'm thinking, okay, I'm truly going to disconnect. I'm not going to look at anything work-related. I should have said I'm not going to look at any social media as well, because I think sometimes having a social media cleanse is good as well, right?
I'd say.
but we're I think this is New Year's Eve right now, and I have all my emails disabled, and I get a WhatsApp message from a client, and I'm like, oh shoot, I did not expect that to kind of come in. And I read the first couple of lines, and it wasn't, but just so you know, it was not anything severe.
Yeah.
It was just something that was not good. Okay. I mean, it could, so when I read that, I shut it off right away. I put it right to archive so I wouldn't see it again. And then I started thinking about it. And in a couple of hours time, we're going to go with the family on the beach to celebrate for New Year's Eve, but it's on my mind. So I'm thinking, what am I going to do here? I'm like, wait a second. Mark talked about this breathing app. Right? Yeah. So I downloaded that app there in Hawaii.
Yeah.
And it was an 11-minute like anxiety release or something of that sort. So I went into the balcony of our resort and I just spent the 11 minutes doing this breathing exercise.
Yeah.
And funny side note, my son came out. I had my headphones in when I was doing it, and he just saw me doing this. What are you doing with your mouth? I mean, this is after the fact, right? Yeah. But how I felt after that breathing exercise, it was like nothing had even happened. Meaning I was still aware that there was an issue, but it never fazed me whatsoever because my mind went to all these scenarios right away from that little thought. And that was my first time ever in my life thinking, holy cow, I just took a little time based on what you told me. 11 minutes. And that completely wiped that complete stress and anxiety away. So then my daughter, I told you about this in our meeting, she's in university right now. I find she's processing stress. She'll say things like, I don't know what it is, but my stomach's bothering me.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I know what you're talking about right now. And my pride, Mark, is like, I don't want them thinking like your father goes through stress and anxiety because I don't want you to have that, right?
Yeah.
But I told her about this as well. And I really want to frame today around the experience that I had because I think what you do is so critical to the human race.
Oh, man, thank you. That's powerful.
Yeah, man.
I'm just trying to receive that. Thank you.
Yeah. So I want to thank you first on being able to kind of share that with me. But because of that, I want to share this with the world. What I've gone through. I think people need to know who you are and how you kind of came to this. Because I want to talk about mental fitness.
Yeah.
But Mark, everyone has a story. How did you get to that?
Yeah. Well, before we go there, I have to acknowledge you first because you can provide knowledge, and obviously we experienced some breath work in person, so you felt it and so forth. But it's you that took the micro pause and went to the balcony and actually downloaded the app and did the breath work, right? Like that was the decision, and obviously you felt the benefits of that. So I mean, I appreciate the praise and the thanks, but it was really you, right? So let's not discredit that.
Okay.
Right. So with that being said, how did I get started in this? So I call this mental fitness, which has really been about a decade, maybe about 8 years of using that language, but you can probably add on another 10 where I didn't have the language and I dabbled in this space. And for me, the way it started was I graduated university. I moved to London, Ontario, and I started in pharmaceutical sales, pretty closely out of university. And I remember at that time, they used to, and people listening may remember these things, they used to hire people in like batches.
Okay.
Like big groups of people, or in that industry and other worlds as well. Like you've got a new product, we need a whole sales force kind of thing, right? That's kind of gone by the wayside now. But so I was part of that, hired in a big batch, and then we're all flown out to Montreal, which is where the head office was, for literally 2 weeks of training, sales training, and then based on your education, what you're coming from, you either trained up on the science or the business and so forth. And I remember thinking, all right, so I'm in a sales function. There's a bonus structure, obviously. They're dangling this like, if you're the top in the country, you win this trip kind of thing, like very standard in any kind of sales role. But we're all being trained in the exact same way. We have the same products. We have the same clinical reprints and tools. Like, how possibly can I stand out and actually win this trip or, make my targets if...
Right.
We're all doing the same thing. Like, it makes no sense to me.
Right.
And I don't know where this came from. For whatever reason, the answer that surfaced was, well, I'm just going to get up 10 minutes early or earlier in the morning. And funny you mentioned Tony Robbins, read positive content. Okay. Tony Robbins was one of them. Success Magazine was another. Then I started, reading books and blogs and stuff. And I'm sharing this because this is now in retrospect where it all started. Even though it wasn't like my work, I was starting to use the practice, because what happened, I want to say within weeks, it didn't matter who I was reading about or studying, 100% of them were asking powerful, reflective questions, personally and professionally, and they had some sort of practice where they were thinking about those questions. So I'd write down the question that I would pick up in the reading, and I would just journal on it for a few minutes before going into work, and just felt fantastic, because it's like you start the day kind of clearing out the mind, and then you have some sort of question to direct or change perspective or whatever it is.
Right.
And it's almost like you start the day on your own terms. And it just did that for a decade until basically the next chapter of my life started. But that's where it all started. 10 minutes, kind of not much different than your 11 minute.
And you did that at the
work.
beginning every day?
Every day.
Okay.
Every day. And it just kept, the practice itself kept proving itself over and over again. I'll never forget, I was in, and this is many years afterwards, I was living in Montreal, and I was in product management at that point. But I was interviewing at a US company, which everything, like multiple rounds of interviews, to the point where the relocation company was calling to say, like, what's in your house? Like, you're going to move to San Francisco and you're going to work at this company. But it wasn't like, nothing was signed yet. There was basically, we were trying to get visas. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, because my mind was like, well, obviously you've got this. I mean, I just told them the contents of my house, right? Yeah. And I was in Boston at that time with our team. I was leading this team. I get the email back and saying, we can't get you a visa. We've tried everything. It's not going to happen. We've tried all these routes, and like we're at the end. And in 15 minutes, I was due to stand in front of the team and like, rah, here's the strategy for the new year. We were in Boston at this like special, doing a preceptorship in the disease state that we're in. And I, like anyone who's been in a hotel, they've got the little notepads on the desk. I grabbed the pad and I just started to write and blow out, like, this is in my mind, a terrible situation, because I was excited about it. And so was my wife and family and whatnot. But let's not forget, you have a fantastic job. You have an awesome team. You're in this, we were in a nice Hyatt in Boston, right on the river. It was like, things could be worse. And it was just a few minutes of that journaling practice that had been cultivating, that when I needed it most, and there was many other moments, of course, but that was one that really stood out, that I was then able to leave the hotel room in a couple minutes and go stand in front of the team, do what I needed to do, and then have a great time and release that experience.
Just by writing it down.
Just by writing it down.
Yeah.
Right? And just like, okay. Yeah. Just talking about what you're actually feeling. Because I didn't learn that from my dad. I mean, and most of us, I think, are like that. Like, we shouldn't talk about that kind of stuff.
Isn't that interesting? You just said that, like, generational, like passing on to, like, I mean, for example, your kids are going to benefit from all your insights and practices. Same thing with me, with my dad, European man, doesn't really like kind of connect too much. He's a provider for the family, but I always think to myself, like, the anxiety and stress that you're going through. Yeah. I don't even know if you're going through anything because you're quiet. And I think I've heard studies that men are usually very quiet without sharing things, but it's interesting the fact that, where you are in your life, you pick up something completely new that you can pass on as a generational wealth, almost like
totally.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and this is why I do what I do. I mean, it's not just men; it's for anyone, because I'm not special. Like I didn't invent the practice of journaling. I learned it from these people that I just found it ironic that we study. Yes. Like the best in business, and I'm like, they're all doing this, right? But we don't know about it. And it's still very much in that state. It's getting better and better. And then especially with men, like I've been part of a men's group for 8 years, and I can't imagine not being with that crew. But I often wonder, my dad was really quiet too. And I mean, I had a great childhood, but there's no doubt, I'm sure he had massive stress. Like thinking of the age I'm at right now, he's passed since, but I'm like, I kind of want to ask, like, Dad, like when you were at this age, like what were the stresses and how did you deal with that? And I didn't know his dad passed away before I was born, so I never knew him, but I heard stories, and like you hear these stories, like a lot of alcohol, a lot of this. I mean, I'm speculating here, but I imagine that's linked to a lot of stress that's just unprocessed, and that's the way to numb out, right?
Isn't that interesting? Like, Mark, how old are you, man?
I'm 40.
Okay, so I'm 47. Okay, I'm turning 48 in a couple of months, right?
I look great.
Right, thank you.
It's that tan.
yeah, it's exactly tan. I find myself thinking more than ever before at my age right now about everything around life and purpose of life and how to navigate through life and the pressures of life and what you're expected to achieve at a certain point in life. And then I look at my son, who's 16, who's not even thinking that at all. Yeah. But somewhere along his life, in the next couple of years, maybe there's going to be small little entry levels of anxiety that are going to start to come in. And that's expectation and pressures and all these kind of things. So the fact that someone at a very young age can grasp what we're talking about today and apply it in their lives, it's going to be exactly what you're talking about right now, that 10-minute a day proactiveness, because you're going to get faced with something that's going to hit you one day, and it's going to try to take you out. And if you have these things, it'll help. You talk about, you created an app. Yeah. Yeah, and I remember it's Keo.
Keo, yeah.
I was trying to get Keo, make sure I got in there. Now, this is an app that was a journaling app. Yeah. And that had such popularity that it hit 87 million users, something of that sort.
The reach,
reach. And then something happened where the app, for whatever reason, you could not make that app go further or something of that sort. And we'll have you talk about that. But hearing either one of a former podcast that you were in or something that you shared, it brought you into a depression point.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. I want to focus on that because this happened after your 10-minute a day things, right? And then I want to just talk about the process of that, and that when life hits you with something like that, how do you break out?
Yeah, great question. So I'm glad we covered a bit of the backstory, because the reason that app came to be was because I had that journaling practice for a good decade, and because of like that one experience, and like I said, there was many others. Right. I knew that the practice worked. Like I put in the hours to see, okay, this is some powerful stuff. And it was around the time that the meditation apps were really starting to take off from a mainstream perspective. So I was like, there's nothing that exists like the meditation apps that are guiding people into a practice like meditation for journaling. And it's full of kind of preconceived notions of like, oh, you're talking about the 12-year-old girl writing her diary about the crush at school, which there's nothing wrong with that. But no, like from what I was sharing, 100% of these, like I would say 80% of top performers that we idolize or learn from are meditating, but 100% of them are asking questions. and have some sort of reflective practice, right? And we're all asking questions. Just are we asking good quality questions, enough of them, and taking the time to let the real answers surface? So the motivation was coming from that. And I said, I'd love to create something for myself, frankly, because there was nothing that existed from a digital perspective, and flipped my brother-in-law an email in London. He still lived in London, Ontario, and said, hey, here's the frustration. And he knew I had these practices, and he's like, oh, that's interesting. I've never dabbled in this space. Let's go and create it. Which we did. And as you mentioned, it took some time, obviously, to get to that level of reach, but we reached a bunch of people.
Right.
And unfortunately, we had to shut it down after a couple of years because, and there's no, I wish there was a better story on this. There's actually no shock in terms of why it didn't financially work. We weren't developers. This was my first kind of entrepreneurial venture. We just did all the mistakes that you hear about. Like, we didn't talk to our customers soon enough. Like, we created something, like, I was really clear about how this thing worked. But at the very end, when we did the first round of user research, I'll never forget this. It was in Toronto at that point, and you're sitting on the Zoom screen, and you're blacked out, and you're watching people, they're screen sharing their experience. And I'm like, why are they clicking there? Like, that's not where you're supposed to go.
Yeah.
Right? It was so intuitive for us who created it, obviously. So that was creating confusion. And because of all of that, people would, the 80 million people that would come in would jet out just as fast because they didn't really understand like where to go and how to work. So, and there's other reasons, but that was the main reason that we weren't able to make money to keep the servers up and go. But the thing I think probably the most important, and to answer your question directly, when I hit delete from App Store and saw that number, 86.9 million people, a massive amount of shame and fear just surfaced instantly. And because it was like, I didn't leave my career on a bad note. I wasn't stressed at work or anything. Like, this was one of those situations where, like, I'll regret not trying this.
Right.
And if it doesn't work, I can just go back. But having now been down this journey around mental fitness and whatnot, like, I knew my core, like, this was the work I'm meant to do. But now I'm deleting the path. So I can't go back, and I don't know what to do. It's the first time in my life, because ever since university, I had some sort of plan. I'm going to go to school for this, then I'm going to go do that. So first time in my life, I never had a plan, and I felt hopeless. And I think when you learn...
How old were you when you were thinking this?
I would have been early 30s.
Okay.
30s were a rough chapter.
Okay.
Hit 40 and there was no midlife crisis. It was let's go.
Right.
And my eldest son, who is now 8, would have been 1.
Okay.
That was a huge decision because as much as, and you'll appreciate this as a parent, as much as we were doing, my wife and I were doing everything possible to shield him from the financial stress that we're under, like, they pick up on all energy.
Yeah.
And
Isn't that interesting? Yeah.
And I'm like, I feel I can't put this on him. Like, that was the final straw. There was the stress in the business and all of that, but then it was like, do I want him to grow up at such a young age with this level of stress looming in the shadows? And the answer was no. Little did I know, it took some time to rebuild out of that. But those were the darkest. Those were, and the reason for, like I said, kind of slipping into, I could feel myself slipping into a depression. So I worked in mental health, on drugs for mental health. I saw the scales.
Right.
Used to present those to doctors.
Right.
And I'm like,
what were you going through? Like, again, because sometimes people can say, I'm going through depression, and someone else can hear that, but what exactly does that mean? I'll give an example. If I'm going into some sort of depression mode, caused with a combination of anxiety and stress, I usually get very quiet. My wife could be talking to me. I'm not registering anything whatsoever. And what they say is that you're not here. Like, you're here, but you're not here.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. I'd be walking around the house and, to your point, like, kind of a bit of
like a zombie mode.
Like a daze almost. Yeah. But the thing that was new to me, like, because I would, I think we're all human. We have chapters or eras where, like, we have an off day kind of thing. This was just another level, and the point where I'd wake up and I would feel it in my stomach. Like I'd feel, I was never, I was never physically sick in the sense of like vomiting or something, but it felt like at any moment something like that could happen, because it was depression, but it was also this intense anxiety of, well,
where am I going? Where
am I going? But we sold everything when we moved from Montreal to Toronto to do this. Thankfully, we had some savings from the other job, but like I actually can't afford rent right now with like there's no money coming in.
Right.
And we have a small family. I mean, we're in an era where I'm also, you can probably appreciate this at that age, like most of your friends are like starting to really thrive in their career. You're moving to the next phase.
Right.
And here I was not too long ago sharing what I was working on and seeing them light up in a way like, I wish I could do that. And now I felt like my tail was kind of between the legs, and I'm like, well, joke's on me, because here I am kind of jobless and I don't actually have a solution to move forward yet. All I know is I feel terrible. I know that I need to be in this work, but I don't know how we're actually going to do this. And the only thing that saved me in that period where it all changed around is I made one really conscious decision that my full-time job for the next little while, because I had started the interviews and whatnot, was my mind. So I kept the YMCA membership, I remember, in Coopertown. And even though couldn't afford that technically, because they had a steam room.
Okay.
And they had weights and exercise. So I would do my exercise, but I would say the thing that was most beneficial was every day I'd go in that steam room for 10, 15 minutes, and I'd put my mind in the place that I want to be. And it was a bit of a break from all that anxiety and those depressive thoughts, to like no different than athletes to visualize their event, right? And just did that over and over again. Then I'd leave and I'd go to this co-working space and try to meet people and get clear. All of those looping thoughts would come back. Pause. I can't operate from there. I'm going to take a quick walk. Reset. Over and over again, until eventually it got to this point where I was left with a question, ironically, since I study these questions, from a mentor of mine who just said, what do you want for your life? And that question then led to, okay, well, if this is what I want, then who do I need to speak to? What's one thing I can do today? And slowly that feeling of hopelessness was starting to dissipate, because there was a plan surfacing again, and I was making small little micro moments of progress.
Right.
It's that I think Tony Robbins says this, the secret to happiness is just progress. When we feel like we're progressing, even if it's small steps in whatever you're doing, we feel good. Right. So that's how it all started. And once I was able to get out of my own mind and get to a point where I was waking up feeling good more days than not, then the real mission started around. I just had a master class in this mental fitness. Like I was experiencing it. I had one kind of really solid practice for a good decade, but there's way more out there, and I didn't have to take and again, I don't have judgment on any of this, but I didn't have to take any drugs or anything like that. I didn't have to go to 14-day silent retreat. It was just these small little micro moments of winning the seconds of the day that made all the difference for me. And that's what I want to get out there.
So really, like it was you pushing through the obstacles in your mind. Say, I need to get out, right? I need to get out to make this happen. Because the thing is, you did have a little bit of a foundation.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That was there to begin with. But what's so interesting is that, you went through something that brought you there, but you broke out. You see what I'm saying? And I think, the quick story here.
Yeah.
I used to train this really obese guy back in the days. And I say train, I'm not a trainer. I was his motivator. He told me, can you help me out? And we would go to the gym. And no matter what I did, no matter what I said, he always half-assed it. Always half-assed it. And one day, one of these guys that would look like this big truck, he comes up to me and goes to me, come here for a second. He goes, what are you doing? He goes, I'm trying to motivate and train the guy. He goes, unless he wants it, you're wasting your time, right? Yeah. And kind of talking about being in the zone. And I think, especially as we're starting in January, where everybody puts these New Year's resolutions and all that, the gym's memberships are flying through the roof right now, right?
Yeah.
And then essentially they say by February, they start to stabilize again, right? And really at the end of the day, someone said, I need to get into the zone. And then really now it's what makes you stay in the zone, right?
Yeah.
And what you're talking about here is like, and we're going to go into that, which is the mental fitness side of things, of what you did and the things that you did. It helped you break out of that, but you did that, right? And I think that's what people understand, is that you have the ability. You don't need to see somebody. There's tools that you can utilize.
So many.
Yeah, and as long as you're aware of those tools, you could break out of what you're feeling through. And just like my experience that I told you in Hawaii, which is a very small one, a journaling experience that I had was a massive decision that I had to make last year, which I'm not going to release what that decision was, but it was so instrumental to the business. And that decision that I made wasn't a good one. And it put me into this very big rut that you're talking about. And then I remember talking to my brother, and he says, you need to write these things down. But when you're writing them down, write down, and something that you talked about as well, write down is fact versus fiction.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, for sure.
Right? So writing them down, and he says, pick things in your life that were considered very traumatic, what you thought was going to happen, and what had actually ended up happening. And I did. And after journaling it, I'm realizing, wait a second.
Yeah.
Everything that I thought was going to happen in 10 different ways never happened that way whatsoever, but my mind went through that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, because we're I always joke, we're all New York Times bestselling authors and stories in our head.
Right.
And that exact practice was one of the ones that I was using in that rock bottom moment, was because if you take a notebook and you say, hey, left side's going to be the story and all the narrative running, and right side's going to be the fact, like, it's when you see it, when you pull all that out of your mind and you see it on the page, like, well, no wonder I feel like garbage right now.
Right.
Like, look at the left side. I mean, I've got to flip the page at this point. And there's only actually a couple things here. Like, if I think of my exact scenario, sure, there was no income coming in, but I did have some savings. My story was, I'm just going to blow through all of that, and then we're going to be on the street. Well, that maybe, but the chances of that are very slim. Like, what is the evidence to support that? Was what I went through on the page.
Right.
I've never been in a position like that. I have a very supportive family. As much as this would hit my ego, we could move in with one of our in-laws or my parents or something like that. I could get a different job to, tide things over and bring some money. There's actually a million different solutions.
Right. But we go right to the worst.
But the mine was, I'm going to be like on Yonge Street, living out of a cardboard box with my 1-year-old.
Right.
Which, feels very real.
Yes.
So, like, if you can pause that and get that out of the way, then you can start to think clearly and actually start to come up with a plan.
Yes.
And it turns out and I didn't know this at that point. I know this now, having written the book. But like, people think of the greatest warriors of time and leaders, like Marcus Aurelius. I mean, the guy his whole journal is published right now. It's one of the best-selling books in the world, called Meditations. It's just him journaling about these massive battles and how he was handling in those times, the fact that they would have a whole bunch of kids and half of them would die, right, just from health situations, and how he was processing that, how he was processing making these big decisions and him not being, assassinated and whatnot. It's just time to think.
Does he talk? I haven't read that. Does he talk about going through stressful situations? I mean,
oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and what was amazing going through that research was, if you were to take his journal or his book Meditations and modernize the English to present day, it'd be hard to tell when he was writing that. Because there's things like,
wow,
I just really need to get to the countryside for a vacation. Meanwhile, there's the Roman Empire is on fire or whatever. There's this massive battle going on, right?
Yeah.
But if you take that out and just, how many people right now even listening thinking, all right, and depending on when you were listening, we're recording, like you said, early in the year. I mean, there's a lot of people probably already thinking about the vacation. You're just kind of coming off of vacation. Right. So again, I think it's being kind to ourselves and realizing that we're not alone, that the people that we study or look up to go through this as well, because we're all human.
Okay,
right?
we're going to get into your book that you brought up, Personal Socrates, which I love that name, by the way.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this, Mark. When you look at what happened in COVID, 2020, right? It changed the world, right?
Yeah.
In our time. I mean, if you go back into the Spanish flu, it changed their time, and it goes on. There's all these time zones that things get changed on a massive level. But I find, and this is just me personally, there's no stat that I can bring up here, that people's anxiety, stress levels, and depressions have increased since 2020. That's what I personally find having.
I can give you data on that, but go ahead.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, have you noticed those trends?
Absolutely. So the data that I've seen is actually showing that, especially in the workplace, that we're not even at 50% of the baseline in terms of our mental well-being that we were at pre-COVID. But there's this kind of an illusion that, well, everything's back to normal, or the main thing that we're dealing with is work from home policies. That's not the case.
Yeah.
People, first of all, the baseline before COVID, I wouldn't say was healthy. It's not like we were all walking around saying that we're not stressed.
Right.
So already we're not in a good state. Then you layer on something very traumatic, like what everyone went through, a bunch of uncertainty and so forth, and also a period of what I would call forced journaling. People start asking big questions, like life questions.
What am I doing with my life?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So now they're unlocking this stuff, but they don't have the tools to process, maybe I didn't like the answer to, do I want to continue doing this, or am I truly happy? But they have no tools. So then you get thrown back into like, okay, we got to back into the office, and some places are 2 days, some days are full time. Like, it's just all over the place.
Yeah. And it seems the world's getting worse, right? It just seems like more and more negative things are happening on a regular basis.
Yeah. It's nonstop. And this is data from last year from Indeed, and they have the largest global workplace well-being database in the world, 250 million data points.
Wow, okay.
And in their data, it shows that almost 60%, I think 59.8% of people in the workforce say that they're stressed at work daily.
Really?
Daily.
Wow, man.
So you layer on like everything that's going on in the world and all of this. It's no wonder why we're not feeling great, or why we have such a huge mental health crisis out there. Just by default, society right now is not in a great place. Right. So that's obviously depressing, but it doesn't have to be like that. And I'm not saying like the work that we're talking about, mental fitness, is the end all be all, but it definitely is a starting point. And like I said, it's and you experienced it. It literally can take seconds.
Right.
Right. It doesn't, like, we don't have to sit in this mental torture. And this was the opening question with your group. I firmly believe that we deserve to wake up feeling good more days than not. It's not every day, but right now we're the reverse.
Yeah.
And none of us win. Our families don't win. Our kids don't win. The work that we're doing, if I think of the work in this industry, you're not as focused and present. You can't pick up what, someone who is focused and present can pick up. Like, you miss things.
But you know what? Also, to your point, remember I said it at the beginning. We actually both said it, but when we met each other, like, the energy was high. It's contagious, right?
Yeah.
But just like positivity can be contagious, so can negativity. Meaning is if I come into an office, like my office here, and I'm pissed, and I'm irritated, and I'm stressed, they're going to start to turn and mirror my body language, and I'm just going to kill the vibe in here. And it's like, there's been times before, I've talked about this in my past shows, where, my whole family's happy and I'm in a pissy mood, and I'll come in and then I'll say something and suddenly I'll just kill the joy. And I'm like, oh man, not, you know what I mean? And it's off right now. So to me, I think what you're saying is that if we can tap into something that can help us, that is literally as easy as some breath work, which you had us all do breath work as well that day, right? Which is kind of what got me in there. It could really kind of start your day off right. And by the way, what I do in the mornings, so my routine, and it's as of probably the last couple of months, so I'll wake up around 4:30, 4:45 every morning. Okay. It's the only way I can squeeze in walking a dog, getting, going to the gym, but also getting into a state of devotions. I'm a spiritual guy, and also if I want to read, it's like the best time for me to get into it. And I'm starting my days like that. I used to get up in the morning, and the very first thing I would do, which is what I'm seeing my kids do, and it drives me nuts now because I used to do that, is just get right on your phone. The first thing you do. So now I've conditioned myself when I get up, I'm not looking at my phone. I'm just going to do my routine to get ready, go downstairs, and start putting goodness into me right away and meditating and do what I need to do. And it's helping me, man.
Yeah, it's mental nutrition.
Yeah, 100%.
Well, and your kids will you know this, they watch, they observe everything. So they'll start seeing that, right? Just no different than what, was it your son that caught you doing breath work?
Yes.
So he's like, okay, what's dad doing there, right? Like your mouth looks kind of funny.
Yeah,
but if
exactly.
he sees you doing it again in some capacity,
Right.
you might ask a few more questions and be like, well, what? How old is he?
He's 16.
16, yeah. So, I mean,
yeah.
like, try this out. Be like, guess what? She's probably interested in sports and things like that, right? Or teams, like, they're doing this stuff in the locker room.
Yeah, 100%. Right? Isn't that crazy? So this is the thing that I think this world, like the fact that you said that, I'm aware of that, but I don't think the world is in tune. You said 80% of these big influencers or multi-millionaire businesses, CEOs are tapped into some form of meditation. Yeah. Right. And the reality is that, like, if people knew, again, that these things were being utilized, I think they'd be more in tune. Maybe they've heard about it, but they're not realizing, no, this is actually a real thing. And you talked about Marcus Aurelius. Yeah. I thought to myself the other day, I was just walking, and again, because I'm just thinking about this all the time right now, I'm like, what did they think 2,000 years ago? What kind of stresses would they have back there? You know, and the reality is, I think that there's certain parts of time frames in our life, not in our life, but in the world, that things could have been super stressful. You know, you know what I mean? Like 25 times more than what we're dealing with right now, right? Yeah. Just that we have a different level of it right now. So to kind of go into that whole world right now of mental fitness, you know, I spoke about earlier who our crowds, who we cater to quite a bit through our audience here. We have a lot of people that listen to us that, you know, are law enforcement and or people in the security industry, whether it's close protection or working frontline, that are dealing with hostility, they're dealing with hate, they're dealing with assault on a regular basis, right? And that can get to you after a couple of times where it continuously happens, right? Where someone may be spitting in your face, or, you know, that abuse that's coming, and you know, people say things like, "Well, you're getting paid to do it," right? That's the quick answer. You're getting paid to do it, but we're humans, right? So, you know, maybe what we can kind of do here is, based on your expertise, based on things that you know that could be like a huge indicator in helping someone break out of that, especially when you said this, like waking up every morning. If you're stressed out, if 50% of the workforce is stressed out on a daily basis, that means that when I go to sleep at night, before I go to sleep, I'm going to be like, oh man, I got to go back into work tomorrow and deal with the exact same thing.
And you might not even be falling asleep. That's the other part. How long does it take you to fall asleep? Do you wake up? Like all of that stuff, right? That's one sign.
Right.
Yeah.
So what do we do here? What do we do here? Right? What do you suggest here? And that can kind of help people navigate through some of these things. And again, what we'll do is we'll put links as well to the stuff that you provided us, right? Sure. But things that you know, like some strategies. You talked about journaling, right? Yeah. You know. But I think to go a little bit more, I think it's having that session with yourself, like I said, kind of sitting down with yourself. Yeah. What are we going to do here? Yeah.
I mean, the theme that comes up. So I just hit 400 interviews last week on my show, Behind the Human.
Yes.
And if I think of all of those interviews, the thing that comes up the most often is that every single person has, for the most part, some sort of practice where they still their mind. Right, it's what you're saying, like basically checking in with yourself.
Right.
And let's just set the context first, because just knowing the audience and this group, I mean, I think a lot of people probably resonate with physical fitness, right? And exercise. Right. So mental fitness is no different. So if you think of physical fitness and for some reason you'd be like, I don't like to run, like, totally fine. That doesn't rule out all of exercise. Right. There's a million different things you can do to move the body, and we know there's benefits to that, right? Same thing with the mind. Be like, the thing I get all the time or hear, and I was one of these people as well, I can't meditate. Like, it's not my thing. Well, then don't meditate. Right. Try something else. There's again a million different things, and I'll leave some questions that'll help identify your things, not my things, not Tony Hawk's things.
Of course,
right? Your things. But it has to start with, I think, first an acknowledgement to yourself that, okay, today I'm here, but I'd like to be over here.
Right.
And just there's a gap. Not to judge the gap. I think most people, again, coming back to that unlock to happiness, we want to progress. So there's always, even if you're feeling pretty good right now, I'm sure you want to develop and so forth, but we have to acknowledge that we want to move forward, right? And that, okay, well, that's going to take a little bit of work. So let's just sign up for that and enter into the journey. Then the question begins, or is, I should say, what are the things that I can do, whether it's a practice or ritual or an activity, that when I do those things, and exercise is usually one of them, but for me, it's journaling, but when I do those things, my mind feels good or clear, or I feel motivated, and write those things down, right? Just pick 4 or 5, the things that come top of mind. Now, so, and you know what those are, right? Like, so maybe it's a walk, I don't know, maybe it's walking your dog or spending time with the kids, whatever it is. But just identify that's mental fitness, your practices. And then it's a matter of ensuring that you're doing those things on a weekly basis. Maybe not all of them, but that you start implementing them consistently. Because then your mind starts to get used to, like, okay, wait, I'm not in this, survival mode all the time, or just reading fear headlines and so forth. And you also start to boost your self-awareness and be like, actually, I'm not going to start the day with the news or social media, because you have contrast, right? Like, when you're doing those other things, you feel good.
Yes.
And then it's the morning, you're like, I don't want to start the day like that.
That's right.
So you start making these micro changes, right, with these practices. Then all of a sudden you can start to think, okay, well, let's say, like, I think of my brother-in-law who is in law enforcement and is also on the, what do they call it, public order unit outside of his regular policing. And so I share that because for someone like that, and be like, okay, well, now you're going to go, in our case, you're going to go to Ottawa or something, if there's this big political thing going on. Well, you know that your schedule's different than normal, like things are just different and whatnot. So the questions I would ask in his position is, what do I need from a mental fitness standpoint to be at the top of my game in that situation?
Right.
Right? What should I be eating? Making micro shifts. Maybe people are bringing food that's like kind of garbage.
Food's a big one, isn't it?
It's a big one.
Yeah.
It's huge what we put in.
Right.
I would say food, like physical nutrition, but also mental nutrition.
Right.
So think about everything that you're putting in your body and your mind. And again, it's not about just saying, oh, I can't eat all of that, but just maybe, I don't know, if it's some sort of fast food coming in, hold the fries, right? Just eat the burger or something like that. Like, just make small little changes, little adjustments. It affects everything.
It does.
Right? And then all of a sudden, you have a little bit more energy. You're not as drained.
Right.
So stuff like that, right? Just being intentional, no different than an athlete does when they're preparing for an event. It's like, okay, this is my training program. I'm doing this because I want to win at this event. Well, what's your event? Right. And we did this with your group too. Like, don't just think about mental fitness or exercise as this big, like, okay, I'm just going to do this for all of time. Sure, there's benefits. Like, if you're moving the body, there's health benefits you're going to feel.
Right.
But if you're training for something, then you train at a whole other level. So same thing with the mind. Just pick something within the next 2-3 months.
Yes.
Right. And maybe it's your sleep. When I wake up, I don't feel energized or I feel groggy. Okay, well, for the next 2 months, I'm just going to do my best to go to bed 15 minutes earlier. Try that.
Right.
And how do you feel in the morning?
Right.
Interesting. I feel a little bit better. And then you start asking more questions. Okay, well, I find that I wake up feeling more refreshed if I don't eat later.
By the way, every time you do these things, whether it be going to bed a little bit earlier or choosing to eat this or thinking about that, are you putting that down, like writing it down, like some of the changes that you're making, so you can not forget, oh yeah, I did that before?
Yeah, I have a practice on Friday afternoons that is really hard to move in my calendar, and it's only 20 or 30 minutes, and it's just a weekly review.
Okay.
And I ask 3 questions. I ask, what did I learn this week? And to usually take a look at my schedule and see where I put my time and so forth.
Right.
Which includes I have a section of my calendar. It's called pre-day.
Yes.
And that's where like you.
Yeah.
The morning is it depends on your schedule, but the earlier you can bring in your mental fitness, the better, because life happens.
That's right.
It throws you off,
Yes.
right? So, and you have more willpower. So I look at all of that and see, okay, well, what would I have changed? Like now that I've gone through the week and would I put my time somewhere else or so forth? And then, what did I learn? Maybe it's an interaction, or maybe I would have handled that situation a little bit differently.
Right.
Like I reacted instead of responded, whatever, small little things. And most importantly, what can I celebrate about this week?
Okay.
And because we forget about that stuff, right? Our
Right.
mind defaults to all the negative and the stuff that went wrong, which keeps us in that survival state. When there's actually a ton of really awesome stuff that has happened where like, yeah, I should be proud of that. And then you get into this habit, right? Of okay, so I tried the sleep thing and actually felt pretty good this week. And look at kind of coincidentally, like these things happen too. Oh, I wonder if there's a trend there.
Right.
Oh, well, try it again for another week.
Right.
And just keep going, right? And if anyone's using any of the wearables like the Oura rings and the Whoops and stuff, I mean, you get that data, and it's cut and dry.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Which I would highly, just knowing this audience, I did interview Kristen Holmes from Whoop, which is one of those device companies, and she works with all their athletes. She's the VP of athlete, I think, science and athlete development or something like that. And the unfortunate stat is shift workers. If you really don't pay attention to your sleep, I think die 5 years earlier than non-shift workers.
Wow.
It just shows how important your sleep is. And I don't say that to be like clickbaity or
no, for sure.
Fear mongering. It's just, I treat all of this as, well, if these are the facts and there's good data to support that, then what can I do?
Right.
Right. So, you can search her name and shift workers and you'll get clips and stuff like that. But that's just one example of something that I know in the realm of protection and law enforcement, there's a lot of disruption with sleep, but there's actually a lot you can also do, knowing that, okay, if you're coming off nights and going into days, here are some things that you can research, that whether that's your diet, your wind down routines, maybe it's some breath work, like different things. There's stuff. My point is there's always something that we can do.
Right.
If we want to do it and want to pull out of the autopilot and not become a mental health statistic. Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm glad you're sharing that, because again, when I asked you about your age and my age, is that I find that some people may be thinking, I'm only 25. Who cares? Like, I don't feel like this right now, or I'm not seeing it. But the reality is, I think everyone comes up to some point where it's like, you're going to get faced with it. You're going to get tested. You're going to get tested in your life, right? And do you want to be proactive to that? Now, we talked a lot about breath work. Can you tell me why the breathing works so well? Like that, we went through an exercise with you where you made us all feel like we're in Zen. I did it in Hawaii. It's something that has been clinically proven to work. What is it about breath work that just makes you feel good?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's science, of course, but I'm like, I think you know me well enough at this point. I'm just, let's state the obvious stuff with these things. We come into the world and we gas to grab our first breath, and then we're breathing ever since, or for the entire duration until we take our last breath, right?
Right.
And we often don't think about all of the breaths that we've taken in between. We just, we don't think about it all. We're working hard, or we're in front of a computer or whatever it is. We're constricting our breath. We're not sitting up straight. We just don't think about it. But we also know that if we take a minute and just take one deep, long, slow breath, and you can do it now as you're listening, and then release, you immediately feel the difference there. Like even my speech has slowed down. One breath.
Wow.
And athletes do this all the time. People that go, I have the great pleasure to go on a lot of stages, take a couple breaths before, kind of calm the nerves.
Yeah.
People that are, people listening would know more about this than me, but if you're training to fire a rifle or a bow and arrow and stuff, right? Regulating your breathing for accuracy. This stuff is, I mean, I read a beautiful book, some sort of Japanese, like Zen of archery or something, which was, I mean, the story was based on being a master, I don't know what the language is, master archer, I guess you can say, but I would say the whole thing was all about the mind.
Right.
And being able to, you know, release the bow without even knowing you're doing that, being so present and calm. And a lot of that has to do with the breath. The other thing I love about it, we always have it.
Right.
Right? Like, I mean, a lot of these tools, I feel I could probably argue that you have it, but maybe, you know, let's say going to the gym is your thing.
Yeah.
Something happens in the middle of the day, you might not be able to get up and just go straight to the gym.
Right, right.
So that's what I mean. But you can stop for a second and take a breath immediately.
Yeah, for sure.
So
or do some push-ups.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's always there.
Right.
It's the thing. I mean, you feel it right away. And you can use it like as you mentioned, download the app, which is it's called Othership. You can prime your breath and start the morning and kind of upregulate and really kick up, you know, the adrenaline and oxygenate the whole body. Or you can do the reverse and use it right before you go to sleep and just completely calm the body and release stuff that's, you know, maybe came up in the day. Like as an example, you know, if you had a particularly hard day and, you know, just being treated terribly and that does sink in. Like I know we put these protective shields up, but it seeps through. Taking a couple minutes before you go to sleep to just release that nonsense.
Right.
And be like, I'm not holding that. Because they're winning even more now.
Yes, yes.
You know, forget the moment. Now they're in my psyche and they're going to affect my sleep, which over time, if it keeps affecting my sleep, that's how disease starts to creep. Like, am I going to let that person completely disrupt my entire life?
Right.
Hell
Interesting.
no.
So you have this routine, obviously, that you do in the morning.
Yeah.
In the evening, do you have a routine as well, or do you do it as needed? Like, you know, before I go to bed, like I know you've heard things that people say, like, you know, gratitude, right? You know, professing gratitude in the evening, thanks for this, and the same thing in the morning. But do you have a routine at all that works for you in the evening?
I have a general wind down routine. I'm more strict with the morning routine if I'm being transparent. Definitely if I feel higher levels of stress, if it was a bigger I mean, I did it last night. It was just a really busy day.
Yeah.
And instead of kind of sitting on the couch and watching Netflix, which I do like that as a kind of a release and just to relax.
Right.
It's like I just went into my bed and read a book, like a John Grisham book.
Right.
Just a different, like no screen, lights a little bit dimmer, physical book, and 15 minutes like felt a lot better. Okay. So I'm more intent. What changes is sometimes I'll do some breath work. Sometimes I'll do some gratitude journaling. But the main thing is I'm like preconditioned now to wind down. Okay. In some cases.
No, that's good.
Right. Like even I actually forgot to change, but these are blue blocker glasses.
Yes,
like I'll right at dinner time, I'll throw these on because I've noticed that, you know, affects my sleep. Very rarely will eat past 7 o'clock. Okay. Just intentional about that kind of stuff. Right.
No, that's good, man.
And if for some reason like this happens, or, you know, maybe have a meeting in the city where it's a dinner or something, and then I've got to drive home and I'm a couple hours outside of the city and it's a late night, I'll adjust the morning to make sure that, okay, I might not get up as early, but and I'll try not to book meetings that morning because I know I'm out late. Whereas it's just, and this is where the Friday check-in comes in, because you look at the scheduling. Okay, well, it's just some proactive planning, no different than I was talking about that public order unit stuff, right?
Right.
Like just be proactive so that you don't find yourself in this place of, oh, I was out late, I'm starting early, I'm stacked in the morning, and it just like, it starts to build.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
And that it clogs up the mind, the body. We feel tight.
No, that's good, man.
Yeah.
You got some good strategies in place. I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Just so that the audience that's listening. So we got a lot of people that want to become police officers. A lot of them.
Yeah.
Now, under the Police Service Act, if anyone applies to a police service and they're not successful, they don't tell them. So they don't know what they did. So imagine that right now. Imagine like now your mind's truly going in 50 different directions. Was it my psych? Was it my physical? What the physical, but where was it? Was it someone that gave me bad reference? The whole 9 yards. So what would you say to someone that's listening right now? And we get a lot of these things that come into us where they just applied to Toronto Police and they just got rejected.
Yeah.
And they right now are like, okay, I've been rejected 2 times in a row. I don't know what I did. I don't know where I'm going in my life. The laughs anxiety comes in right now. What am I doing? How would you put this person at peace right now? What would you say? Like, there's some quick fixes right now.
Yeah. Well, I take a few breaths.
Okay.
First of all, and YouTube 5-minute breath workflow of some sort just to calm down. Then I would say open up a notebook, grab a pen, and answer the following question. What am I pretending not to know? Because you can't control the fact that you're not getting feedback. That seems to be the system. Seems crazy, but it seems to be the system. But if you can quiet your mind and pull yourself out of that anxiety loop, which the breath work will help, or take a walk, and then ask that question, that's where you'll surface where, you know what, I probably could have put in, I'm a little bit weak on this section of that test or whatever it is. Or I can put more effort here next time if you want to do it next time.
Right.
Or maybe it's, maybe that's not the path that I'm meant to be on.
Right.
But we have the answer to those questions. It's just often our mind is so full that it can't surface.
Okay. No, that's good, man. And again, I think these are things that help. Now, for those listening who want to be able to access a little bit of more Marc in their life, okay? Now, you wrote a book, a best-selling book, Personal Socrates, Better Lives, Better Questions. I reverse that, Better Questions, Better Lives. What can someone find if they were to get that book? What would they get from that book, reading it? Well,
my intent is that they have quick hits of positive mental nutrition.
Okay.
So, what's nice about when you release a book out into the world, there's so many different use cases that I wouldn't have projected that people are writing in saying, hey, this is how I use the book. I'm like, oh, it's amazing. But how I wrote the book or how I intended it to be used is the way that I use these kind of books is my coffee is brewing in the morning. Maybe I have a minute and I have a book leaning against the coffee machine. And for me, my book is there too, because I actually reread chapters.
Nice.
Because it's evergreen. It's full of questions to reshift your perspective. So I have that there, but then I often have a book on some sort of Stoic philosophy, like the Daily Stoic or Robert Greene stuff or whatever. And you pick up the book and you just take a couple minutes. Like in my case, the chapters are short. They're 4 to 6 pages max. It's not going to take you very long. But what we're talking about, like if you land on Marcus Aurelius' profile, for example, all of a sudden, if you wake up and you have just been rejected by the police academy for whatever reason, you start reading that profile, you say, well, wait a second, it's not that bad. It shifts because you start reading about, what they're talking about and like, oh, well, they made it through these really hard moments, so can I.
Right.
So, and when you're reading that, you're not looping in all the New York Times best-selling author stories.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it pauses that, take a couple breaths as well and set, how do I want to show up today?
Okay.
Yeah, you're not going to say I want to show up, stressed or pissed off at myself or disappointed. No, I want to show up motivated. Okay, so then your mind starts to look for those moments. So everything I just said takes less than 10 minutes.
Okay.
And you start your day with your cup of coffee or tea or whatever it is, glass of water, 10 minutes of some nutrition for the mind, some intentions. You're miles ahead of the vast majority of the population.
I love that. I'm going to get that book, man. Because to me, I think, again, I want to inject the mind. Look, we're injecting vitamins all the time, right? And nutrition and whatever. You need that piece as well. Now, you also have, you mentioned as well, a podcast called Behind the Human.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you have actually some pretty significant names. Tony Hawk was one of your recent ones that you had on there, right?
Yeah, end of last year.
Yeah. Tell me, what what could someone learn from your podcast? Because to me, there's a lot of pieces of gathering. From what I heard from it was that you're trying to find out people's journeys, right? You know, what are they going through, right?
Yeah. Well, I just want to know, again, I want to know what they do to win the seconds of the day.
Right.
And the show is intentional in the sense that you're going to find all kinds of walks of people and industries. Like, it's not specific around billionaires or Olympians or authors. It's, extreme sports like Tony Hawk, but there's also award-winning designers and writers. I've interviewed developers, like all walks of life, because we all have a mind and we all have to deal with the same human emotions. So I want to know, what do you do? What have you done in your hardest moments? And also, what do you do proactively? Not so that we have a prescription, but so that we can, because this is how breathwork came into my life. It just kept coming up over and over again. I'm like, well, it seems like a lot of people are doing this. I'm going to try it out.
So even when you're interviewing all these people, you find there's like a kind of reoccurring trend between them.
Oh yeah. Yeah. They're, like I said, they all have something to still their mind.
Yes.
And they're all focusing or prioritizing some sort of learning.
Right.
In different ways, whether it's reading, podcasts, whatever it is.
Right.
And they're putting attention to their mind.
Right.
Like Tony Hawk is a good example. You know, this stuff is so simplistic that it sometimes feels laughable in a way. I remember I asked him, this will make more sense. First he said, skateboarding is my meditation. I said, oh, cool. That makes sense. You're like literally pioneering how long you can skateboard. He's in his, I think 50s, maybe even 60s at this point, still skating ramps. And so he says that to me. And at the time he had just come off of recovering from breaking his femur for the second time.
Okay.
And I said, okay, so if skateboarding's your meditation, you haven't been skateboarding for quite some time because of this injury. And he said, it was the hardest injury for him to recover from in his life. I said, what are you doing? He said, I just have to celebrate the smallest micro wins each day. Yesterday, I wasn't able to move my leg this way.
Yes.
And, then it progresses. Like now I'm able to get to the counter by myself without a crutch or something.
Right.
Which all that is a gratitude practice.
Wow. Yeah.
Like we don't have to be Tony Hawk to deploy a gratitude practice.
Right.
Take a look at your micro wins for the day.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
There's so many moments like that.
I mean, just the fact that honestly, when I wake up, I'm like, I'm alive.
Yeah.
Like it's so not like people, it's so easy to pass that, but the reality is you woke up today.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And be thankful.
And one way to do it, I used to do, especially when, you have a low day or let's say a whole week, maybe, one easy way to flip that is I did this on my desk and I just had like a erasable marker. I have a kind of a glass top, but you can do this Post-its on your phone, whatever. Mm-hmm. As things happen, just notice, even if it's the cup of coffee, I'm like, this is a good cup of coffee.
Yeah,
write that down.
Right.
And you get to the end of the day, you're like, holy smoke, like there's a legit list
I
there.
like that.
Because you can have the end of day gratitude flow, but you don't remember half of that stuff.
Right.
Because we're just programmed from a survival standpoint to focus on those negative things or the things that evoke fear. Because that's how we stayed alive. So half of the good stuff we forget, more than half probably, and we actually need 3 positives to outweigh 1 negative, according to our people in the science community. So we've got to over-index on that.
Yeah.
And if you're writing that down, just keep the list.
I like that, man.
Right?
Yeah.
And then next time your mind loops and you're not feeling great, pull that list out. Like, look at this. Life's pretty good.
I love that, man. And one of the things that I think it'd be good to do here, Marc, is I do want to shout out for what you do. You do go to major entities.
Yeah.
And you speak on this, right? So for those that want a little bit of Gospel of Mark with a C, right?
Yes.
How do people find you so they could bring what you do into their work culture?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, if you just search my name on LinkedIn, I'll pop up. Or my website is just mchampagne.com, and champagne spelt same as the bubbly.
Okay.
But typically what I do, real straightforward, because I come from the corporate space, I speak from that place and from that perspective of understanding that there's back-to-back meetings, understanding that you've got budget meetings and you've got a pitch strategy, or if in your sales, there's a lot of rejection and all of this kind of stuff. So I'll typically meet with a client and just like, tell me what's going on. What's the pulse of the team, right? And what do you have coming up already in the plans where you might be bringing the team together? I'll integrate there, and we'll kick off your meeting with a lot of what we're talking about right now, introducing the concept of mental fitness, but then allowing people to experience some of these practices, and 100% ensuring that people leave with their own one-pager or their own protocol for their mind, which is how everything starts. So then other clients, I'll work with them for 6 or 12 months to make sure this is really integrated into their business.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this as one last question before we close here, Marc.
Yeah.
So, a lot of the strategies that you talked about today, and from the beginning of your routines to end the evening routines, I find are again, for me personally, because I can identify with that, and I've actually put a lot of thought in it since December. It's been something that has been like profound for me.
Sure.
And I mean, I know we call it in the McKay Forum groups game changers.
Yeah.
I would really identify it as a game changer. So I definitely am going to be putting some links for people to connect with you.
Yeah.
But to close, I wanted just to see if you would want to throw out one nugget out there that you feel that I want to share this with everyone to hear. And if you can do this, do it, because it's something that I find very, very impactful. Whatever that is around this ecosystem of mental fitness.
I think the biggest thing one of the questions that's not often asked is we spend a lot of time on our goals, our professional goals, our business objectives. We put strategies in place and so forth. And if you're out there, whether you're an individual or a team lead, think about the following question: like, what do I and what does the team mentally need to perform at that level? That's the question that's not asked. It's just assumed that we're going to show up and be able to be at our best. Right? So if we can, and you can take that individually as well. Like for you personally, how do you want to show up in this world? For you, for your family, for your work? And do you have the tools? Do you feel equipped to show up like that consistently? And if not, what are some micro changes that you can make? Right? And just start. And keep it simple. Like simple works. Right? Don't we like if you're doing nothing and then say, all right, I'm going to get up 60, 90 minutes earlier and jump in a cold plunge, meditate, journal, run around the block. Sure, you probably feel all right for the first few days, but then you're not going to be consistent.
Right.
Like for me, if one of the kids for some reason is up at night or sick or something and throws off the sleep, and that rocks my morning routine, right? I'm not doing the whole circuit, but I'm going to do the 10 minutes of breath work.
Right.
Non-negotiable.
Right.
And then at least in that situation, I didn't do my 60 or whatever it is. I got 10 minutes and I feel like I started the day on my own terms.
Good, man. I like that.
Yeah. So find that for you.
Yeah. I love that. Well, look, I want to thank you for taking the time to come down here, man, and do that. I've learned so much more than when we started here. And I think many, many people can benefit from this. And I can't wait for everyone to listen to this, man. And
me too. This was fantastic.
Yeah. Amazing,
Energy's
man.
Great.
Thank you so much, man. I appreciate you coming down.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. Have a fantastic day. And remember, just breathe. Take care.
Yes.
Thank you for joining me in today's podcast. This podcast was created for protectors in the fields of law enforcement, executive protection, security, and anyone looking to level up their mindset. If you are learning from this podcast and you're enjoying it, please subscribe to our YouTube channel at The Sentinel Mindset. That's a zero-cost way to support us. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast both on Spotify and Apple. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. If you have questions for me or comments about the podcast or guests you would like me to consider on The Sentinel Mindset, please post all comments on YouTube. I do read all the comments. Please also check out our sponsors, thearenatoronto.com. The Arena was created to help all those in the fields of law enforcement security, and all that to achieve their fitness goals. I want to thank our producer, Matthew Doyle, and creative support, Jaslene Singh, who help me with this podcast every week. We value your feedback and are here to support you. Tune into the Sentinel Mindset every week where we look in the mirror to make real changes and explore what it takes to achieve greatness in your craft.
This podcast is brought to you by Executive Protection Lifestyle Canada. Make sure to drop by next week and don't forget to subscribe.